tie you back into your culture, but when you're using European folk tales, myths, it ties you back to the wrong culture. And gives a foundation for you to follow the rest of the stuff. Now, a fairy tale, as I was saying, fairy tale, myth is a fairy tale with Latin and Greek words, and a fairy tale is a myth with English words. The folklore and legends of the people gives a person a plan for living. This is how you program a person. You program the child with the folk tales. It gives them a plan for living, a plan of way to control the behavior. The plan is conscious, which we call male principle, and the plan is subconscious, what we call the female principle. Life's plan is controlled by other people, by circumstances, by nature, and the person. This is what is communicated to us in the folk tales. That nature sometimes can give you obstacles, and society can give you obstacles to overcome. That's part of the life's plan. The plan's objective and the results can be predicted. The plan's objective and results can be predicted. You're free to make the choices in your plan, but you're not free to choose the consequences. You can choose to touch a fire or not touch a fire, but the consequences of touching a fire is getting burned. You're free to make the choice, but the consequences are out of your control. That's what the fairy tales are communicating to us. Now let's go back and look at the order. This is Bes, a tutelary spirit here. This is 500 BC, carving or painting in the pyramids. Bes, which is the name for a god or a spirit. And this is where we get the fairy tales from, this small person, which some people call fairies because they're very small. And the fairies in Greek mythology are goddess of vengeance. They're part of the triad of the three. Relentlessness, jealousy. These are names. Alecto is relentlessness, and Magnera is jealousy. These are Greek names for these aspects. And Trisiphon, which is the avenger of death. And the fairies represent this energy force field, which they got from our ancestors in Africa. Also, we will find that the eye is repeated over and over again. We have the eye of Ru, the Ujad. The eye is a symbol of, when you find on amulets, meaning the eye of wisdom, your third eye, the special eye. And that's represented by the vagina in European fairy tales. That man is some kind of way the woman is destroying his third eye through sex. And wine, of course, is one of those things related to women because it's red. And they believe that that causes a man to be drunk in his morality, and it dilutes him, and it waters down his spirituality, the wine of women. Now, when we have the cows used in the fairy tales, they're alluding back to where they first learned this from, that we are nurtured by God. This is the cow nursing, the symbol of maternity. Phoenicians, Alans Tash, this is 900 BC. This is where they get the symbol of the cow jumping over the moon. All of this perverted out of African culture. The frog represents fertility, resurrection, because the frog sheds its skin. That's why you have the frogs in European fairy tales. And of course the witches are evil. They're evil women. They're destroyers of man's potency. But the symbolism is quite clear. We go back and we understand that myths and fairy tales, that's what the culture uses. The culture uses myths and fairy tales for explanation for its existence, to explain God, sex, nature, and society. It gives a person the value in life. It gives you a meaning for the rituals that you use. It defines your roles and rules and obligations in society. It also gives a continuation of the position of those in power. Fairy tale says that these people are going to stay in power no matter what you do. You have to serve the king. And it helps continue the culture. I mentioned the cow. I want to show you the cow goddess, the goddess Hathor, god in the pharaoh. This is the cow goddess, god in the pharaoh. These cows are sacred because they represent the female principle, represent nurturing, but they're viewed as something evil in European fairy tales. And that's how they always depict it, escaping, trying to destroy the moon by jumping over the moon. Now when you get into the fairy tales, and they always reveal how life began in some way. It's a hidden message. Earth, the god Canute makes humans from clay. This is what we believe in our mythology and our stories, where the Europeans believe that whom made God, made man out of human, which is dirt, and that's where you get the word humus in human being, from hum meaning dirt. But we believe that Canute made God, made man out of on a potter's wheel. And this is reinforced in our mythologies and so-called fairy tales. And the dog is not an evil person in our stories at all. Where in the European stories or fairy tales, the dog is depicted as being something that's trying to kill Little Red Riding Hood, or sex, the animalism in man. But this the dog is the priestess mask, representing Anubis, the god of the dead, the god of your spirit. So it has a positive image in our myths and our stories, but when you get into European stories, fairy tales, it gets kind of diluted and distorted. And it's hard to erase this program once it's put in the child. We call it hard wiring. The child gets hardwired, and once you get that embedded in the child, it's hard to erase that image. It's too many pictures, and pictures are worth 1,000 words. The symbolism in the fairy tales causes motion in the mind, and then the motion in the mind causes the person to apply certain symbolism to the picture. In other words, they are motion pictures. You see the picture, it creates motion in your mind. And then the motion in your mind creates another picture. But if you've already programmed the motion in the child's mind, they will create another picture when they see owl symbolism. But the bird with the human head is Ba, the symbol of the soul. Whereas the birds in European fairy tales present some kind of evilness or are related to sex. I had mentioned the tree of life, and I mentioned that earlier about the trees. You have the two trees which you call bookends that hold a lot of knowledge between them and give birth to this knowledge, and so we have bookends that symbolize this. This is upheld by the goddess Hathor again. This is Memphis, Egypt. This is 1500 BC. Our fairy tales and myths go back longer than the Europeans because we taught them, mostly the Greeks, who stole a lot of things from us. Yeah, I want to get this themes of the fairy tales related to you much clearer. There are major creation themes. God creates himself. God gives messages about mortality and immortality to an animal. As I mentioned before, they gave it to a rabbit, to a turtle. The animal gives the message incorrectly to man. Man loses his immortality. Then you have to go through some trial or tribulation to have some victory over these evil, like Hercules. That's the kind of story. So he goes through trials and challenges to get back his immortality again. Then the shedding of skin, which represents regeneration and change to bring back immortality. But what I have to relate to you is a story which is the foundation for all these other stories. We got to go back to Gib and Nut, which is man and woman who had a child named Osiris. That's the heaven and the earth get together and they have a child called Osiris. So in the beginning there was no fire, there was no shelter, no laws, until Osiris was born. And then Osiris went about the world teaching Ma'at, teaching fire and architecture and things like that to people. But while he was away, his sister, wife, Isis, was in charge of the rules of Ma'at. But see, one thing happened was Osiris' brother, Set, became jealous about this because his wife was in charge. And he tried to spread bad rumors about her, that sort of thing. So he wanted to take charge. He wanted to be in control, and he didn't want his brother Osiris to be in control. So what he did was he measured Osiris's shadow, and he built a coffin that would only fit Osiris. He said, well, I guess I'll have a party, and when he comes back, I'll get him to get in the coffin, that way I can get rid of him. So he made this coffin the exact size of Osiris, measuring his shadow, which we call the Ka. And he made it out of this wonderful wood that had nice smells to it, like sandalwood and various other fragrances. The coffin smelled very good from this fragrant wood that it was made out of. And he teamed up with 72 of Osiris's followers and the Queen of Ethiopia. The number 72 represents 36. If you divide it in half, you have 36, and 36 is a lunar cycle. So you have a male